Order and good morning. I call Saki Bhatti to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I beg to move that this House has considered the use of stop and search. It is a pleasure once again to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Wright. I've called for this debate today because I'm greatly concerned about the increasing prevalence of knife crime in our society, and it is rather apt given that we've had the second reading of the Crime and Policing Bill just this week. In the year ending September 2024, knife-enabled crime increased by 12% on the previous year. And as a West Midlands MP, regrettably, I'm no stranger to the devastating impact of knife crime in the region and the impact that it has on families and our communities. And I feel stop and search, as backed up by evidence, and the reason that I've called this debate today, can play a very important role in tackling knife crime. So let me first start by talking about the impact of knife crime itself. The West Midlands Police area recorded the highest rate of knife crime offences in England and Wales for the whole of 2023. Sadly, we are experiencing worse levels of knife crime than London, which is, of course, under the stewardship of Sadiq Khan. In 2023, offences involving a blade per 100,000 of the population totalled 180, up from 167 in 2022. The London Met Police Force was 165, so that gives a scale of the problem in the West Midlands. Since being elected in 2019, the realities of the knife crime epidemic in the West Midlands has regrettably been all too clear for me. When I was elected as recently as back in 2019, although it seems an age away now, that there was a tragic case of Jack Donoghue, who was punched, kicked and stabbed in the chest in a 4-on-1 attack near Potwold in Solihull in 2020. In October last year, 17-year-old Reuben Higgins was stabbed on Station Road in Marston Green near Solihull. As Reuben's family said in a statement following on from his tragic death, he was a loving son, grandson, brother and nephew who will be dearly missed. On a recent edition of BBC Politics Midlands, I discussed the horrifying death of James Brinley in Aldridge, who was killed in 2017, not too far from where I was brought up. And I was touched by his father's real hope and sincere hope that change could still be made in the lives of so many young people so that they didn't feel that they had the need to carry knives. And just last week, Mr Chairman, the friends and family of 12-year-old schoolboy Leo Ross put him to rest. Mourners gathered at Christ Church in Yardley Wood to say their final farewells to Leo, who was described by Christ Church of England Academy as a lovely and bright pupil. And given the advice I've been given, I'll be very careful on this because it is a live investigation. But on 21st of January this year, Leo was stabbed in the stomach whilst walking home from school. Not only was a promising young boy's life cut far too short, but a whole community is left grieving. Leo's family will never get over the tragic loss of their son. His friends will have an unfillable void in their lives, and I can only imagine how worried they and their parents will be every time the school bell rings and it's time to go home. And this simple act of walking home and that first unaccompanied trip home from school is, of course, a huge part of a young person's life, growing up and becoming independent. But now, for many in the area, it may take that bit longer to have the confidence to get out there on their own. Devastating and shocking events like these underline the absolute importance and necessity of stopping young people getting hold of, carrying and using weapons on our street. And while I will focus much of my speech today on the importance of using stop and search, I want to put on record that my view that tackling violent knife crime encompasses more than just the use of stop and search. In fact, my right honourable friend, the right honourable member for Chingford and Woodford Green, outlined in the debate on Monday that we also need to work at tackling people, especially young boys who have been sucked into gangs in the first place. And I urge everyone with an interest in this debate to read the Centre for Social Justice's report, Lost Boys, that was published last week. I thought it was an excellent report which highlighted the issues that drive young boys who overwhelmingly make up the numbers of victims of knife crime and end up in criminal gangs. And again, while I will use my time today to advocate in favour of stop and search, I do not dismiss anyone for a second who thinks that we need to take preventative action too. My case is that they both must come hand in hand. And as my right honourable friend, the member for Chingford and Wood Green, said on Monday, in many cases the knife is actually very much the last act. My constituents in Meriden and Solihull East are very proud of our brave police officers who work 24 hours, 7 days a week to keep us safe. And I want to put on record my personal thanks to our brave police officers who work tirelessly to keep us all safe. And I pay tribute to the Chief Constable, Craig Guilford, who I know has a great reputation in tackling some of the most violent crimes, and I hope he will have that impact in the West Midlands too. They work in difficult circumstances, and policing today is very different to how it was just a few decades ago. That's why I want our police forces to have everything they need, and I believe that stop and search is absolutely necessary for them to do their job effectively without fear of being reprimanded for just doing their job. Mr. Chairman, let me be unequivocal. Stop and search saves lives. There is very strong consensus amongst police chiefs that it's an important tool for disrupting crime and taking weapons off our streets quickly. And you can see this in London, without doubt. It is unquestionable that there is a correlation between the Mayor's decision to allow stop and search to drop by 44% over 2 years and the fact that since he took office, knife crime offences in London have increased by 38%. Stop and search allows the police to preempt dangerous situations and offers an effective and credible deterrent to violent criminals who might think about carrying a dangerous weapon. Critically, stop and search not only protects the public, but might actually stop a potential perpetrator from crossing the Rubicon and taking part in illegal activity. Very simply, we need stop and search, and the law must make sure that the police are unafraid to use it. The case for stop and search is backed up by research from the Oxford Journal of Policing, which found that stop and search can cut the number of attempted murders by 50% or more. And, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we can have sensitivities around this issue. Stop and search undoubtedly has a huge role to play in cutting crime and ultimately saving lives. And I proudly back the police and want them to have the appropriate powers on this, because every single life lost to violent crime is a tragedy. But every single time a violent crime could have been prevented but wasn't, is a shameful failure. It's a failure of national government, of all parties of all ilks, of local government and regional government. Too often, we say in this House, never again, and yet it happens again and again. So I want to call for more stop and search powers so that we can make real and meaningful change. Whilst there continues to be a knife crime epidemic, we can't be sensitive about what the powers that we give the police to keep us safe. The work of Professor Lawrence Sherman, former Chief Scientific Officer for the Metropolitan Police, is an interesting point. Mr. Sherman is very supportive of the use of stop and search and suggests we should focus on areas that are deemed to be high risk. Sherman argues that the effective use of stop and search requires it to be legitimate and supported by local people. To that end, he suggests that targeted stop and search in high-risk areas is necessary and has the scope to be effective. Crucially, Sherman argues that whilst using data and bias might be controversial, the need to protect people should come first. In addition, Sherman, working with Alex R. Picaro and the Cambridge Centre for Evidence-Based Policing, conducted 15 years of research in London, which demonstrated how effective stop and search really can be. Their paper, Stop, Search and Knife Injuries in London, concluded that increased SSEs, police stop and search encounters, can significantly reduce knife-related injuries and homicides in public places. It is clearly backed up by the science in the data. Alongside strong academic evidence suggesting stop and search is effective, the HM Chief Inspector of the Constabulary also strongly advocates for its usage. The report is thought-provoking and points out that little academic research has been conducted on one of the most crucial benefits of stop and search, and that is deterrence. This is a really important point. It's likely that someone considering a deadly weapon or drugs may well think twice if there is a credible chance that they may get stopped and searched. In August 2022, under the guidance of the former Home Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Whittam, the previous government empowered more than 8,000 police officers to authorise enhanced stop and search powers. It came after a smaller pilot contributed to nearly 7,000 arrests for offensive weapons and 900 arrests for firearms following a stop and search. The evidence is abundantly clear that it is effective at taking weapons off our streets, which will help to bring down violent crime. Stop and search is also overwhelmingly backed by the public. In November 2022, Crest Advisory found that stop and search has a high level of support across all ethnic groups, and it found that a total of 86% of adult respondents supported the police's right to stop and search someone if they were suspected of having a weapon of them. Of these, 77% of black adults supported the police having the right to stop and search to find weapons, and 71% to find Class A drugs. In my mind, stop and search is a very useful, important mechanism that can be used to cut crime and keep us safe. And one other statistic, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to share at this stage is that black people who are 4 times more likely to be murdered as a result of knife crime. So hence that might be some of the reason why there was so much support for stop and search amongst the ethnic minority groups. However, these powers can only work if we have a clear police presence on our streets. Under the previous Conservative government, I was proud that we achieved our manifesto commitment to recruit 20,000 new police officers. This allowed crime in the West Midlands to come down by 10% and led to reduced wait times after 999 calls. The new government also has a target to recruit more police officers, but I feel their numbers fall short when you properly assess their plans, because I believe only 3,000 of these will be new officers. Most of the 13,000 are either reassigned or redeployed, or are part-time volunteers or police community support officers with no powers of arrest. Perhaps the Minister may comment on those. In Meriden and Solihull East, my constituents remain concerned that their local police and crime commissioner, Simon Foster, has failed to commit to keeping Solihull Police Station open, and also failed to have a front desk at Chamsleywood Police Station, which I've been campaigning for. The public will have greater confidence in the police force if there is a visible presence, and that does not just mean police officers. There has to be infrastructure like police stations, clearly visible to warn criminals that they will be caught. And it's very clear that stop and search is an essential tool in law enforcement, but we can't also underestimate the centrality of prevention, as I touched upon earlier. And that's why the estate strategy in the West Midlands is really important. Perhaps the Minister may be able to comment on that, or maybe write to me with further details. Knowing the police can stop and search an individual, it means it becomes a deterrent, a powerful one, which may prevent some carrying a knife. And when in government, the Conservatives recognise that prevention and early interventions are as important as enforcement. That's why between 2019 and 2024, we funded initiatives across the country, known as violence reduction units, in areas across England and Wales, where they were most affected by serious violence.
I know his comments about the last Conservative government. Does he agree with me that there was a slightly confused and mixed message from the 14 years of Conservative government? We had a large portion of it where the former Prime Minister, then Home Secretary, was trying to reduce the amount of stop and search. And then, much like with the officer numbers in 2019, there seemed to be a very sharp about turn and an encouragement to do more. Would he agree that that was a very confusing message for police officers like myself who were serving at the time?
Well, I'm pleased to hear from the honourable member. I hope, I wish him all the best in all his previous and future service. But no, I don't agree. There were mixed messages. We were very clear in 2019 that we would increase the police force, and we did hit that manifesto target. I think the confusion comes now with the new targets put forward by the Labour government and the lack of clarity of whether there will actually be 13,000 new officers. I was speaking, before the intervention, I was speaking about the violence reduction units. These reached over 271,000 people in their 4th year alone, and in combination with additional visible policing patrols, prevented an estimated 3,200 hospital admissions for violent injury. Stop and search is a vital tool, but by cutting the sale and distribution of knives, we can further keep knife crime down. And that's why I was proud that between 2019 and 2024, more than 138,000 weapons have been removed from Britain's streets, with almost half seized in stop and search. On Monday, the Crime and Policing Bill, I listened to powerful speeches from across the colleagues from across the House. As I noted in the Shadow Secretary of State's speech on Monday, I agree that it is vital to have stop and search powers, as I've said. But however, stop and search powers numbers are currently down due to misplaced concerns, in my view, about community tensions. As the bill progresses through Parliament, I deem it is essential that the government get police forces to use stop and search more. This means legislation should be amended to make stop and search easier. In particular, I'd like to ask the Minister what steps she's taken to amend the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, specifically Code A, to make it easier for police officers to use stop and search. As outlined by police chiefs and academics, stop and search is an important tool in the fight against violent crime. But I fear police are not using this power to its fullest extent because of fears of being sued or disciplined or called racist. And I'm afraid, given the horrific impact of knife crime, we cannot be sensitive about this. That's why I joined the Shadow Home Secretary in calls to amend PACE guidelines to make it easier for the police to use these vital powers. In addition, just before the election in May 2024, the Conservatives gave the Home Office a £4 million boost to fight knife crime, with £3.5 million into R&D for new technologies, which can detect knives carried from a distance. I think this point was addressed in question in the debate, but if the Minister can reaffirm regarding this technology. It's been indicated that this technology is nearly ready to be used and rolled out in its entirety. It has the potential to greatly improve the police's detection powers, which will help to keep knives off our streets and protect vulnerable people. So to that end, I want to ask the Minister what steps she's been making to harness these new technologies and other technologies in the fight against knife crime. And let me say this is more than just being party political. It's an issue that affects all of us. So I'm more than happy to work with the Minister on a cross-party basis to support her because I want knives off the street. As I outlined at the start of this debate, the West Midlands is now experiencing a higher rate of knife crime per 100,000 of the population than London. And so I hope this debate will put pressure on our Police and Crime Commissioner in the West Midlands, Simon Foster, who at the moment is presiding over a catastrophic escalation in knife crime in the region. And my offer of support goes out to him as well, because I think it's too important. The knife crime epidemic in London and the West Midlands is a deep cause for concern, but in some areas, knife crime is coming down and there may be lessons to learn. And I want to pay tribute to the PCC for Leicestershire, Rupert Matthews, who's helped drive knife crime down by 8%, the PCC for Staffordshire, Ben Adams, who's seen knife crime fall by 10%, and the PCC for Kent, Matthew Scott, who's seen it fall by 16%, and the PCC for Warwickshire, Philip Seckham, who's seen knife crime fall by 18%. So, Mr Chairman, as I conclude my opening remarks, everyone in this House has a duty to keep our constituents safe. Since being elected in 2019, there have been plenty of reminders, tragic reminders, that despite all the good work our police do, there are still killings happening on the streets of Britain as a result of knife crime. That's why I believe that stop and search must be used responsibly to help fight crime and prevent tragic deaths on our streets.
Honourable Member, can I remind all backbench members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate? And the question is that this House has considered the matter of the use of stop and search. Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. A pleasure to serve under your chairship, and can I thank the Honourable Member for Meriden for setting the scene so very well. Indeed, I think I can recollect that the Honourable Member has had a debate on this before, and the last term of Parliament was indeed important to visit this subject matter again and to make some comments in relation to it. I speak very much as a supporter of stop and search in terms of ensuring public safety and of reducing crime. Our streets must be a safe place for everyone, and that's the thrust of what the stop and search is trying to achieve. And we have witnessed over the last few years some horrific incidents of crime and violence. So it is important to be here today to discuss and to raise these matters. As I often do, Sir Jeremy, I bring a Northern Ireland perspective to it and what we're doing in Northern Ireland in relation to stop and search. I suppose we maybe have a different aspect of it from the point of view that we've had a terrorist campaign for some 30 plus years, thankfully much reduced, and a peace settlement in place, which both communities seem to have bought into and which are important. But nonetheless, part of the PSNI's policy is to continue stop and search, and they do that. Stop and search is a method used to prioritise public safety throughout the whole of the United Kingdom, and in particular, in this case, Northern Ireland. Most recent statistics by the PSNI highlight that between the start of January and the end of December 2024, just past, the PSNI conducted almost 20,000, to be precise, 19,288 stop and search operations, which is a 24% decrease compared to 2023. Furthermore, in 2023, there was a 6% increase from the year before. So there's wee bits of ups and downs in relation to it, and some disparities. But I think the issue is that the PSNI sees stop and search as a clear, consistent PSNI enforcement measure that reduces crime, reduces the threat of violence in the street, and addresses what the law-abiding citizens want to see in their country. I commend the PSNI for that. I'm glad to report to my constituency of Strangford that crime levels are down. Perhaps isn't consistent with everywhere else, but it is welcome that the police are very active and alongside the community and elected representatives are able to reduce crime in a way that's noticeable. For Northern Ireland especially, Sir Jeremy, there's a history of conflict and everyone will indeed recall that and they're fully aware of it. So there are still ongoing concerns about terrorism, even though the level of it is much reduced. The impact that it has on crime and indeed on modern society. Even beyond terrorism, potential stop and search has been used for addressing several crimes, including drug use and trafficking, gun violence, gang activity and carrying violent weapons. The thing we've got to remember about Northern Ireland, Sir Jeremy, is this. While the paramilitaries may not be fighting a cause as such, I use that in inverted commas, from either side of the community, many of them some have walked away from their past, but there are others who have just changed their affiliation and become criminal gangs, which the police and the PSNI have to take on significantly to reduce what they are doing in communities and on the streets. So, Jeremy, conducting stop and search is supposed to retain and to remain a positive attribute in society. And in my opinion, from experience, from my own constituency, but also from further afield in Northern Ireland, it works, and it does work, providing it's done in a very sensitive way. We've seen over 10,000 arrests for illegal drug possession use, so there is proof that it is a worthy method. It is successful. Is it successful? Yes, it is. And does it reduce crime? Yes, it does. And these things are factually and evidentially true. However, there needs to be assurances that different communities across the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland do not feel threatened. And that is emphasised that this scheme is not simply out to single out, I should say, certain groups or people. This isn't about skin colour or ethnicity. It's about crime and those who break it, irrespective of who they are or what they are in this community. Confidence in policing is crucial, and we must ensure that the disproportionate use of stop and search does not undermine the need and necessity for good policing. To conclude, Mr. Chairman, there is crime everywhere, it's a fact, but the job of the PSNI in Northern Ireland and the police here in the mainland and across this United Kingdom is to stop it. That's what the normal person in society wants to see. In some areas, worse than others when it comes to crime, and particular crime is more prevalent in some areas as well. However, the intent remains the same, and there is good cause, I believe, to use these powers transparently to preserve individuals' rights and equally to maintain and improve public safety. I should have, at the very beginning, welcomed the Minister to her place as always. Look forward to her contribution. I know that the Honourable Lady has responsibility for England and not for Northern Ireland, but I know she's also very keen, Sir Jeremy, to work alongside all of the other regions in the United Kingdom to improve for everyone. We may sit here at Westminster, and the Honourable Lady sits here because that's where she's elected for. I sit for Northern Ireland and Strangford in Northern Ireland, but at the same time, the policing improvements that can happen here through the Honourable Lady's work and her department's work will benefit us all. I also look forward to the contribution from the shadow spokesperson as well, and also from the Lib Dem front spokesperson in relation to it. I think everyone's contribution, I believe, enlivens this debate, strengthens the targets that we're aiming to achieve, and the need to have an active, very active stop and search within the human rights of everyone in this country. So I look to the Minister for her response and a commitment to ensure that crime in Northern Ireland and all the devolved nations and here in the mainland are able to improve conviction rates through efficient and proper use of stop and search. If it's done the right way, it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Ribeiro-Addy.
Thank you, Sir Chairman. It's always a relief to serve under your chairmanship. I wanted to start by congratulating the member for Meriden and Solihull East for bringing forward this debate. It comes at a very crucial time, I think, as we discuss the new government's crime and policing bill. When we're legislating to give the police more powers, I believe it's important that we properly assess the powers that the police currently have and how these are already being used. Police stop and search is an issue of serious importance for my constituents, and the reason for that is twofold. Firstly, because my constituency of Clapham and Brixton Hill has a high proportion of young black and ethnic minority men who we know are disproportionately targeted for random stop and search. And secondly, because unfortunately my constituency experiences high levels of gang violence, drug dealing and antisocial behaviour more generally, which creates serious issues for the area. So my remarks today will address these 2 points. On the disproportionate use of police stop and search on black, Asian and ethnic minority communities, the evidence is clear. According to the latest government data in the year ending 31st of March 2023, there were 529,474 stop and searches conducted in England and Wales, equating to 8.9 per 1,000 individuals. However, when disaggregated by ethnicity, we see that black people were subject to 24.5 stop and searches per 1,000, Asian people 8.5 stop and searches per 1,000, and white people 5.9 stop and searches per 1,000. This means that black people are over 4 times more likely to be stopped and searched. And report after report reveals the severe problem of institutional racism within the Metropolitan Police. The overuse of stop and search to target black and ethnic minority communities is stark evidence of this. It's resulted in entire communities feeling unfairly targeted, over-policed and alienated from law enforcement, and this doesn't serve anybody. Black and ethnic minority people are no more likely to commit crimes than their white counterparts. I will repeat that again. Black and ethnic minority people are no more likely to commit crimes than their white counterparts. They are also no more likely to be in possession of illegal substances or objects than their white counterparts, yet they are more likely to be stopped and searched, and it's for this reason that they are more likely to appear in criminal statistics. The disproportionate use of stop and search has a severe impact on community trust in the police, which is at an all-time low, particularly in boroughs like Lambeth, which already has the lowest trust in policing across London, according to the Mayor of London's most recent data. Many people simply do not believe that officers will treat them fairly, because the reality is that they do not, and that lack of confidence makes community policing far less effective. This is not just a question of numbers, it's about lived experiences. It's about young black men being stopped multiple times a week for no good reason. It's about people feeling criminalised simply as they walk down the street and go about their business. It's about communities feeling that the police are not there to protect them, but harass them. Policing by consent is a fundamental principle of British policing. The relationship between the police and the public should be built on trust, respect and cooperation. Random, unjustified stop and searches undermine that principle entirely. And that's why I've been steadfast in calling for the abolition of Section 60 stop and search powers. To be clear, and I want to be absolutely clear on this, intelligence-based stop and search can be a useful tool, has been a useful tool, and will continue to be a useful tool to tackle crime.
Will she give way?
I will give way.
On the disproportionality point, I just want to make the point that these UK figures are really quite misleading, because they take into account huge swathes of the country which are almost overwhelmingly white and where there is no stop and search being done. The fact is that black people disproportionately live in the cities, and that is where the stop and search is being done, and they happen to live in areas like the Honourable Member's constituency where there is a lot of stop and search being done. So I would just urge some caution when we look at these disproportionality figures to ensure that we're not misleading people and we're not actually undermining the confidence in the police in these ethnic minority communities by suggesting that all police are using these powers inappropriately. In my experience, the vast majority of officers, the vast majority of stop and searches are conducted appropriately.
I thank my honourable friend for his contribution, but I would point out that the figures are absolutely clear. And whilst I get what he says about the proportion of black people across the country, I'm talking about lived experiences. I'm talking about experiences of people that live within my constituency and in other parts of the country feeling like they're being targeted. This is not just about the numbers. This is about what is happening to people on a daily basis. And the reality of the situation is that people need the police. People need the police, as you've heard in this debate already, that black people can, in some cases, in particular crimes, be disproportionately the victims of crime. And for that reason, we need to be able to work with the police in our communities. But it's difficult to do that if you feel like you're being harassed by them. And the reason why I point to intelligence-led policing quite clearly is because if you are able to work with the people in your communities, if they are able to trust you, they can often be the ones to provide the intelligence that helps to prevent the other crimes. But if they feel like they are being impacted as far as by these stops and searches, as far as they're concerned, they see the police as an enemy. And I want them to see the police for who they are meant to be, the people that are meant to keep them safe. Now, the second point I wanted to raise was with regard to increased gang crime and drug dealing and overall antisocial behaviour in Clapham and Brixton Hill. Now, as I said, I do believe that effective stop and search could actually help clamp down on this. Effective intelligence-led stop and search. However, inconsistent application actually means these police efforts are being undermined. And in areas like Brixton, known drug dealers and criminals are often not targeted with this stop and search, while young black men with no criminal record are repeatedly stopped. And this selective approach raises concerns about policing priorities and whether they are truly focused on reducing crime or maintaining control over certain communities. And when I raise the issue of known offenders not being searched, I'm often told that the police do not currently have the powers to intervene. And I find this incomprehensible because it cannot be true. The police arguably have more powers now than they have done in a very long time. So I can't begin to imagine what more powers they could possibly need to carry out their work. I understand there are things that may need to be done in terms of increasing their confidence, but I certainly don't believe they need more powers. So rather than creating new police powers, as is the current trend, I think we ought to be looking at how they're using the powers they currently have and how they can use them more effectively. If people are going to trust the police, there has to be genuine transparency and accountability around the powers they currently have, and this has to include stop and search. It has to be evidence-led, and they have to be working with the communities that they serve to tackle crime. Thank you.
Grateful to the Honourable Lady. There being no other backbenchers seeking to speak, we move now to the front bench speakers, and I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Sir Jeremy. It really is a pleasure to be in this debate and to have you in the chair. And I want to congratulate the member for Meriden and Solihull East for securing this debate on this important topic. He laid out really powerfully some utterly tragic cases at the start of his remarks, and he made the point quite rightly that far too many young people are losing their lives to knife crime. And I really agree with him very strongly on the need to support our police as they tackle and prevent crime. And I particularly agreed with the point he was making on the important role of preventing crime, and he laid out how there isn't one simple answer to how we do that, and I very much agree with him on that. But a large amount of my remarks are going to mirror quite a bit what the Honourable Member for Clapham and Brixton Hill said in her remarks, because the foundation of the policing model in this country is trust. The police are a vital part of our community, and that trust is built and protected by using approaches and tactics that both show results and apply fairly to all of us. Any successful policing model must strike the right balance between individual freedoms and keeping our communities safe, and any discussion of stop and search tactics is really a discussion of where any of us thinks that balance sits. For too many, stop and search is not a policing tactic that builds trust, and trust is undoubtedly the foundation of any effective policing model. Without it, communities can disengage, cooperation can dwindle, and crime prevention can suffer. And today, too many communities who should feel protected by the police are instead made to feel like targets. According to the Home Office's own stats, which the Honourable Member mentioned from March 24, if you're black, you're around 4 times more likely to be stopped and searched in the UK than if you're white. And when it comes to suspicionless stop and search under Section 60, this figure rises even higher. The Liberal Democrats are calling for an end to the disproportionate use of stop and search, and that includes abolishing suspicionless stop and search powers, because the evidence is clear. The surge in Section 60 stop and searches, which we saw between 2016 and 2020, coincided with a drastic decline in arrest rates. And polling from the Criminal Justice Alliance found that 3/4 of black, Asian and minority ethnic young people believe that their communities are unfairly targeted by stop and search. We want all members of our community to engage with policing efforts to keep our neighbourhoods safe, but that's made really difficult if people do not trust the police to act fairly. And we must not forget that we're talking about the everyday lives of people in our local communities. These are not just statistics. We need a police force that serves and protects, not alienates and discriminates. And that's why the Lib Dems are fighting to ensure that stop and search is always used fairly, proportionately, and only when there's a genuine suspicion of wrongdoing. That's how trust is built. However, this debate is not just about what we must stop. It's also about what we must start and what we must do more of. And the new Labour government has a unique chance to consider exactly that. As I outlined on Monday in the second reading of the Crime and Policing Bill, we will be supporting the government in any efforts it makes to return to proper, visible neighbourhood policing. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their own home and walking down their own streets. Yet, under the previous Conservative government, that was far from the reality. Our police forces remain overstretched, they're under-resourced and unable to focus on the crimes that affect people the most. The record speaks for itself. Every day, 6,000 cases or so are closed without a suspect being identified, and only 6% of reported crimes result in a suspect being charged. And in a move that defies logic, the last government slashed the number of police community support officers by more than 4,500 since 2015. And these PCSOs were the backbone of that community policing, the familiar, trusted faces in our neighbourhoods, building relationships, offering support, preventing crime. This new government has an opportunity to do much more than tinker around the edges of policing, and we will be pushing it to commit to restore proper community policing, a model that has been abandoned for too long. The use of stop and search disproportionately can divide our police from our communities, whereas proper neighbourhood policing builds the trust and cooperation that our police force so desperately needs. Our communities deserve better, and the Lib Dems will continue to fight for a fairer, more effective approach to policing, one that prioritises neighbourhood policing and community trust. And this is how we make our communities safer, how we build trust, by building a policing system that works for everyone.
Minister Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy. First and foremost, I'd like to extend my condolences to the families of those who we've heard about today who lost their lives so tragically to knife crime. Every life lost as a consequence of knife crime is a tragedy. As members from both parties acknowledged, all parties acknowledged during Monday's debate on the Police and Crime and Policing Bill, we owe it to those victims and their families to support police forces in ensuring there are robust measures in place to stop these crimes. These incidents reiterate our responsibility to our constituents. We must support the police, providing them with the powers and the resources to intervene and take these horrendous weapons off the streets. I'd also like to thank my friend, the member for Meriden and Solihull East, who proposed this debate and rightly highlighted the need to remove offensive weapons from our streets if we are to save lives. He's right. We cannot have sensitivities around this. We must ensure the police have the ability to stop and search any individuals they believe pose a danger. We must ensure they have the power and freedom to achieve this if we want them to effectively protect the public. As a number of members have highlighted, stop and search remains a critical tool in stopping crime for the police. Look at one figure alone that underlines its necessity: the number of weapons being found. The data released covering the period until March 24 showed that 16,066 stop and searches resulted in an offensive weapon or firearm being found. This statistic alone is sufficient to justify the use of stop and search. In the past, in London alone, stop and search has taken 400 knives a month off the streets. Consistently, we've seen a significant number of weapons seizures in London, seizures that without stop and search would not have happened. Over the past 4 years, 17,500 weapons were seized as a result of stop and search, including at least 3,500 in 2024. However, this issue is not confined to London. In the West Midlands in 23-24, there were over 6,000 resultant arrests, while Greater Manchester reported 5,620 resultant arrests. Rightly, we focus on the impact stop and search can have in apprehending those who carry dangerous weapons. However, I appreciate that weapons are not always the most common reason for stop and searches. This should not, however, undermine the need for the police to stop individuals when they have reasonable grounds to suspect they're carrying illegal drugs or stolen property. Both of these activities are illegal, and the police should be able to intervene to prevent them. Drug offences remain a flagrant breach of the law, undermining our communities. Members will be aware that PACE Code A sets out stringent criteria regarding stop and search. It's appropriate there is extensive guidance in the 39 pages to ensure it is conducted properly. However, historically, a number of officers have raised concerns that stop and search numbers are down due to misplaced concerns about community tension. Therefore, I echo the words of the Shadow Home Secretary and encourage the Government to ensure police forces use stop and search more, and where appropriate, amend legislation, including PACE, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 84, Code A, to make its use easier for officers. We cannot be in a situation where officers have significant concerns about intervening. Moving forward, we should all be able to agree on the need to improve the effectiveness of stop and search. In the past, police forces have had to make changes to ensure it's used more effectively. We should always strive to make searches more efficient and increase the number of positive outcomes. Research suggests that when police communicate effectively with the public, the stop and search process can become significantly smoother. While there may be occasions when attempts to communicate are met with undesirable outcomes, such as hostility, this does not mean fewer searches need to be carried out. Rather, we should be seeking to conduct them even more effectively. It was also welcome news to hear the Minister speak during the crime and policing debate about the Home Office's continued work with industry partners to develop systems capable of detecting concealed knives from a distance. The Shadow Home Secretary was right in his former role to allocate funding to these projects to ensure we develop the necessary resources. Considering Phase 1 of the Innovate project is expected to be completed by the end of May, resulting in the first prototype systems, it will be interesting to hear more from the Minister broadly about whether she believes the work produced by the Innovate projects can play a role in helping the police act more effectively in this area. We've already seen in parts of London how effective technology can be, and it will be essential to integrate technology with the powers available under stop and search. However, for example, facial recognition technology deployments in London across January and February of this year recorded a maximum false alert rate of just 0.008% in a single deployment. This demonstrates how we can enhance police effectiveness with technology and how it will be crucial to use these tools alongside stop and search to strengthen policing capabilities. I'm also aware that police forces, including the Met, have been working with a range of stakeholders to develop their stop and search charter. Communication from officers within the Met clearly highlights their strong support for stop and search. I think everyone here would welcome attempts to build trust in the system, particularly by fostering an open dialogue with local communities. However, this must be balanced with ensuring that police forces, such as the Met, retain the freedom to operate effectively. Across the country, other forces have implemented similar measures. Will the Minister therefore commit to monitoring the impact of community involvement to ensure that police forces are not unduly influenced by a vocal minority opposed to stop and search, but instead listen to the broader community whose main concern is reducing crime? As I and others have noted, I'd like to see stop and search applied as extensively as necessary. Given the prevalence of knife crime, we must recognise that an increase in stop and searches can have serious benefits. However, an increase in stop and search is contingent on the availability of police officers. The funding pressures facing police forces in the coming financial year amount to approximately 118 million more than the funding increase they are set to receive. This funding gap, as the National Police Chiefs Council have warned, will inevitably lead to cuts across the force. Consequently, the 43 police forces across England and Wales may have to cut as many as 1,800 officers to make up for the shortfall. It would be valuable to hear from the Minister whether they believe this funding gap will impact on the police's ability to conduct essential activities such as stop and search. I know that everyone who's participated in this debate recognises the need to make our communities safer. We believe stop and search plays a vital role in enabling the police to take the necessary action to achieve this. As such, I hope the Government will commit to ensuring stop and search remains a key tool in the fight against crime. Thank you.
Minister Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Sir Jeremy, and it's a pleasure to serve under you this morning. Let me begin, of course, by thanking the Honourable Gentleman, the Member for Meriden and Solihull East, for securing this important debate, and I think his very eloquent speech setting out his concerns around the issues of both knife crime and stop and search. I would just like to remember, as the Honourable Gentleman did, the young people that he referred to, the victims of knife crime in the West Midlands. He talked about Jack Donoghue, Reuben Higgins, James Brindley, Leo Ross, all victims of knife crime. And I think all our thoughts and prayers will be there with their friends and family after what has happened in those cases. Now, I am also wanting to say as well, and acknowledge, just as the Honourable Member did, the work of the police, who work tirelessly day in, day out to keep us all safe. And I want to pay tribute to the West Midlands Police Force, to the Chief Constable Craig Guilford, and the PCC Simon Foster. And I was also just reflecting on the fact that in the West Midlands, in terms of knife-enabled robbery, the figures are reducing. So the data is going the right way in the West Midlands on that particular issue. I just thought that was worth flagging. Now, I'm very grateful to all the honourable members who've contributed to this wide-ranging and, I think, very thoughtful debate on this important topic. Of course, it's always very helpful to hear from the Honourable Member for Strangford about the experience in Northern Ireland. And he's absolutely right that, as the Policing Minister, I'm very keen that we learn from the different nations and countries and regions what's working, because we all want to see a reduction in the crime that is blighting parts of our communities. So I welcome that insight from Northern Ireland. And my honourable friend for Clapham and Brixton Hill spoke, as ever, with great eloquence and with great thought about the issues, the knotty problems around the use of stop and search, the disproportionate use of stop and search on certain communities, and the lived experience of individuals. And I will come on to make some comments about that in a moment. And I just want to refer to the interventions from my honourable friend for Pendle and Clitheroe. Again, very helpful to hear his perspective as a former police officer. I think that experience adds to the richness of the debate that we can have in this place. Now, I want to, as I said, talk about stop and search, but I also want to make some comments about knife crime in a moment as well. Now, stop and search, this is a complex issue, and as we've been hearing, it can be often a divisive issue as well. But it is a vital tool for tackling crime. But it must be used fairly and effectively. And getting that balance right is key to this government's mission to make our streets safer and restore confidence in the police. And I just want to refer to two of the points raised by the Honourable Member. The first one was around officer confidence. It is absolutely essential that the police have the confidence of the communities they serve, but of course that officers have the confidence they need to do their vital and often extremely difficult job of keeping us all safe. Every police officer should have the confidence to use stop and search powers where they have reasonable grounds to suspect someone is carrying weapons, drugs or other illicit items. Now, Chief Constables and police leaders play a critical role in ensuring that officers have that confidence, and we've been discussing PACE Code A, how important it is that police officers understand that code and use it properly. And of course the College of Policing provides detailed authorised professional practice on stop and search as well, to ensure that police officers have that knowledge and that confidence. I also want to say, in the majority of forces across England and Wales, the total number of searches conducted has risen for the last 2 years in a row. That's not the case in the Metropolitan Police area, but in all other areas, it is, in the majority of areas, it is going up. And the Shadow Minister asked me about knife detection technology, as did the Honourable Member as well. And again, I agree with the Honourable Member who speaks for the Conservative Party. Technology has a really important part to play, and I know the former Police Minister is very passionate about this issue and talks about it a lot. And as I said in the second reading debate on the Crime and Policing Bill, the Home Office is working with industry partners to develop systems that are specifically designed to detect knives concealed on a person at a distance. and phase 1 of that work is expected to be delivered by the end of May, resulting in the first prototype systems. So I hope I'll be able to talk more about that after May. So I just want to again talk about why we think stop and search is so important. In the year to March 2024, stop and search led to over 16,000 offensive weapons being taken off our streets. There were over 75,000 arrests following a stop and search for a range of offences, including weapons possession and intent to supply drugs. In short, stop and search helps police to save lives and tackle crime. Where officers have reasonable grounds, as I said, they should feel confident in using these powers. And policing sector leaders like Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, and Sir Andy Cook, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary, as well as the Independent Office for Police Conduct, are all clear that stop and search is an important tool in the police tool kit. Now, public opinion agrees. Recent research shows that a majority of people support the use of stop and search. This is true across all ethnic groups. And a majority of young people also agree that the police should have stop and search powers. But policing sector leaders also stress that if it's done badly, stop and search undermines that trust in the police, and it can damage the relationships between the police and the communities they serve. And that in turn can lead to less cooperation and compliance, and ultimately make it harder for the police to keep people safe. So turning to the issue of fairness, I think stop and search powers have long been seen to affect some communities disproportionately, as my honourable friend talked about, with those stark ethnic disparities in their use. So this government cautiously welcomes the fact that disparities in the use of stop and search have fallen in recent years. 5 years ago, black people were over 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. But in the most recent data, that has fallen to 3.7 times more likely. But of course, that number is still far too high. And that's why the government backs the National Police Chiefs Council's Police Race Action Plan. And earlier this month, I met the NPCC team leading the work on the action plan, along with the Independent Scrutiny and Oversight Chair. The plan aims to foster an anti-racist culture, values and behaviours within policing, which will inform all operational policing practices, improving experiences and outcomes for black people. And on stop and search in particular, the plan commits chief constables to identifying and addressing stop and search disparities, particularly on drug searches and the searches of children. And I will be working with police leaders to ensure the aims of the plan are adopted and embedded in all forces. And it's also important to note that the government is introducing a requirement for police forces to collect data on the ethnicity of people stopped by police under Section 163 of the Road Traffic Act. And this will help to address concerns about potential disparity in the use of traffic stops. Now, I do want to say something at this point about Section 60 suspicionless searches. So where serious violence has occurred or where intelligence suggests that it may occur, a senior police officer may authorise police to use stop and search without reasonable suspicion. And these authorisations, known as Section 60 authorisations, are limited to a particular area for a particular period of time, usually no longer than 24 hours. These powers are used exceptionally and are rightly subject to strict constraints. But these searches are contentious within communities, and it is concerning that rates of ethnic disproportionality for Section 60 searches are particularly high. So the Home Office is introducing new data collection on Section 60 with effect from April, including an authorisation decision, including on the authorisation decisions and the locations authorised. This will help improve transparency and accountability for the use of this power. And His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services have made a range of recommendations on Section 60 for police forces and agencies. And I think the public will expect to see the policing sector respond comprehensively to those recommendations. Now, just looking at the effectiveness of stop and search, we know that stop and search works best when it is used in that targeted and intelligence-led way against active offenders and when officers have strong grounds for suspicion. And this point is supported in recent work by the highly respected Youth Endowment Fund. Now, I want to come on to talk a little bit about knife crime. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that stop and search is one part of how we address the problems around knife crime. But an enforcement approach in general is only one part of that approach, and we need to tackle knife crime in many different ways. Prevention remains the most effective mechanism for tackling crime, and that's why this government has made a commitment to halving knife crime, and within that effort, investing in vulnerable young people is a key priority. The Young Futures programme aims to intervene earlier to ensure vulnerable children are identified and offered support in a much more systematic way. It will also create more opportunities for young people in their communities through the provision, for example, of open access mental health support, mentoring and career support. And we're also bringing in new laws, stronger laws, to crack down on the sales of dangerous knives. And these measures will help to deter potential perpetrators, young people, and make our streets safer. I also think it's worth referring back to a manifesto commitment that this government made, which was to ensure that every young person found in possession of a knife is referred to a youth offending team and given a mandatory plan to prevent reoffending. And as to the questions that were raised about neighbourhood policing, part of making our streets safer is seeing that visible police presence, which has sadly in our neighbourhoods, town centres, villages, has been reduced over recent years. That's why we're putting the 13,000 uniformed officers back onto our streets. And the question was raised about the allocation of that 13,000. So the 13,000 is over the course of this Parliament. The government has doubled the amount of money going into neighbourhood policing from next month to £200 million. We initially identified 100 million in the provisional police settlement. We've doubled that to 200 million. We are in discussions with police forces to make sure that the allocations work for the individual police forces. So they are coming forward with the mix, the workforce mix, that they believe will work best for them in the communities that they serve. And that announcement will be made shortly. Yes, very happy to.
In terms of obviously the big concerns around redeployment in that space, does she think there is any risk that the redeployment of police officers from response policing could affect the response times when people dial 999?
Of course, we want to see all parts of policing properly staffed and funded. That's why there's over £1 billion going into the policing settlement for the coming year, over and above what was in the 24-25 budget. I would say that this government is committed to making sure that we have officers in our neighbourhoods and in our communities. Equally, response is also something that PCCs and chief constables will be very mindful of. But I think it's quite clear that policing can walk and talk at the same time. I don't think just because we're saying neighbourhood policing has to be built up again after the decimation that we've seen, that will mean other parts of policing will not be business as usual. So I think that policing will be able to deal with that. And just on this point as well, there was mention made about in particular the Metropolitan Police and their stop and search charter. I think this was raised by the Shadow Minister. And I'm really welcoming of that piece of work, that charter in the last few weeks, with its emphasis on respect, training, supervision and oversight. And I look forward to seeing how that charter's delivery plan progresses and what impact it has on the work of building that public trust, which my honourable friend referred to. I also just want to say a few words about violence reduction units, because we recognise the valuable work and the significant progress that violence reduction units have made. And of course, these were set up under the previous government. in understanding what is going on with serious violence. The police funding settlement for next year includes £49.7 million for the continuation of their work to prevent serious violence delivered through their VRU programmes. And the VRU brings together those local partners to understand and tackle the drivers of serious violence in their area. They facilitate the sharing of data across organisational boundaries to build a shared understanding of the root causes of violence locally. And in response to these programmes, VRUs are delivering a range of early interventions, which I know the Honourable member referred to, that preventative work to divert young people in particular away from a life of crime. And this includes mentoring, trusted adult programmes, intensive behavioural therapies and sports-based diversionary activities, all really positive. And we want the Young Futures programme to build on the work of the VRUs to improve how we identify, reach and support young people at risk of being drawn into violence. And that is why we'll be asking them to play a leading role in the establishment of the Young Futures Prevention Partnerships programme, which is building on the existing partnership networks and considerable experience and expertise to test and develop a model before moving to national rollout. I also think it's just worth mentioning the Coalition to Tackle Knife Crime, because we have this very ambitious target of halving knife crime over the next 10 years, and we're not going to be able to do that in isolation. We need to work together with those who share our vision for safer communities. And that's why the Prime Minister launched the Coalition to Tackle Knife Crime in September, bringing together campaign groups, families of those who've tragically lost their lives to knife crime. And I know that James Brindley's family are involved with the Coalition. And also has young people who've been impacted and community leaders united together in their mission to save lives. We also, from the West Midlands, actually have Pooja Kanda, Lynn Baird, and as I said, Mark Brindley, as members of that coalition. And having that lived experience of young people is so critical to the coalition, and we're keen to ensure that they have a platform to share their views, ideas and solutions to make Britain a safer place for the next generation. I also want to mention, because it's pertinent to the West Midlands, the serious violence reduction orders. Now, there are 4 police forces, including the West Midlands Police, and they're currently piloting the serious violence reduction orders, which was a 2-year pilot beginning in April 23 and is due to finish in April this year. And these orders are court orders which can be placed on adults upon conviction of a knife or offensive weapons offence, and they provide police with the power to automatically stop and search individuals convicted of knife offences with the aim to deter habitual knife-carrying behaviour. And this pilot is being robustly and independently evaluated in terms of its effectiveness in tackling knife crime, as well as any disproportionality in its use. And I look forward to those results coming forward. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about gangs, and a number of members referred to gangs, and I think it's absolutely crucial that we tackle that gang culture that lure children and young people into crime and run county lines through violence and exploitation. And as committed in our manifesto, we are introducing a new offence of criminal exploitation of children in the Crime and Policing Bill. And that new criminal offence is necessary to increase convictions against exploiters, deter gangs from enlisting children and improve identification of victims. And alongside a new offence, we are creating a new regime for CCE prevention orders to prevent exploitative conduct committed by adults against children from occurring or reoccurring. We all know that county lines are the most violent model of drug supply and the most harmful form of child criminal exploitation. And through the County Lines programme, we will continue to target exploitative drug dealing gangs and break that organised crime group's model behind the trade. Now, we know that police may come into contact with children through stop and search, whom they suspect are victims of criminal exploitation. And it's vital that police take an appropriate safeguarding approach to potential victims and ensure they receive appropriate support. And we are providing specialist support for children and young people to escape county lines and child criminal exploitation. And we will be delivering on our manifesto commitment to roll out further support through, as I've mentioned, the Young Futures programme. Now, I will finish by repeating my earlier thanks to the honourable gentleman for securing this debate and for all members who've participated. This is a sensitive issue, and I am really grateful for the constructive and insightful nature of the discussion today. The government's position is clear. Stop and search is an important tool, but it must be used fairly and effectively, and getting that balance right is key. And I am very keen to carry on working with the police to achieve the best outcomes that we can.
I thank the Minister, and finally, with a little more than the usual 2 minutes to do it in, I call Saki Bhatti to wind up the debate.
Mr. Chairman, you'll be pleased to know I don't have a 26-minute wind-up. Just to say thank you to all members across the Chamber. Thank you to the Shadow Minister for the challenge he put, and thank you to the Policing Minister for the constructive way in which she's engaged in the debate. I also want to acknowledge the Honourable Member for Clapham and Brixton Hill. I absolutely accept the stats that she set out, although no statistics are perfect. And actually, if you look at subject-adjusted disparity stats, while they still show that black men are more likely to get searched, it is much more targeted. But as I said, no stats are perfect, and trust in communities and the trust that communities should have in policing is really, really important. But I'm also conscious of a narrative being built up that may undermine police officers in those communities. So I suspect this debate will rage on. I will continue to work with the Minister, with the Shadow Minister, and of course offer to work with the Minister to change the guidance, if we can, to make the lives of police officers easier. And I want the Minister to succeed, because her success means saving lives, and it means when we say never again, it really does mean never again.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman and to all members who've contributed to this debate. So the question is that this House has considered the matter of the use of stop and search. As many as are of that opinion say aye. And to the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. The sitting is now suspended until 11 a.m.